Hey, Phil fams. Continuing my 1970s dystopian science fiction movie series, I'm going to review one of the worst movies I've ever seen, and that's saying a lot. Deathsport from 1978. Although envisioned as a follow-up to Death Race 2000, it has absolutely nothing to do with that film whatsoever. It was written by Alan Arkush, and it stars David Carradine, Claudia Jennings, who was a Playboy playmate and not a very good actress, David McLean, Richard Lynch, Brenda Venus, William Smithers, and Will Walker, and directed by a first-time director named Nicholas Nikifor, who's somebody who Roger Corman gave a break. Corman was the producer. Apparently, Corman warned David Carradine not to make this movie. He thought it was very badly written, and he didn't really think it was necessary for him to do it. Carradine would later come back and say he wished he hadn't made the movie, that his career, quote-unquote, never really recovered from this blunder. It takes place in the year 3000, thousands of years after the quote-unquote neutron war, and society has broken down into a series of city-states, and there are also some independent people called range guides who have somewhat telepathic communication powers, and they have these glass swords that they call whistlers because they make a sort of a singing song when they use them. And everybody rides horseback except the people who live in a city called Helix have discovered something called the Death Machine. And what the Death Machines are motorcycles with metal shields and laser guns mounted to them. And they make a noise like jet engines. It sounds, ridiculous. It's a really bad sound effect, and they just use it over and over again. Anyway, they have something called Deathsport, which is they don't have the death penalty. Instead, criminals are made to fight each other, and for the entertainment of the masses, as it were. And although nobody really seems to like this sport very much, you don't see any spectators, so I don't know really who they're putting it on for. But the evil leader, Lord Zappola, who is played by David McLean, wants a female range guide captured. He's captured Kaz O'Shea, who is the character played by David Carradine, who is the son of a famous range guide, only known as O'Shea, was his mother. Reference was made that she's a redhead, but that's all we really know about her. And she's something of a mythical figure. But he wants a female for the Deathsport to compete with him. So his forces take their quote-unquote death machines and they ride them out, and they capture a range guide by the name of Denier, played by Claudia Jennings, and she also has another range guide named Adrienne with her, and they're protecting a young girl. That Adrienne is played by Brenda Venus, who I think was way more beautiful than Claudia Jennings, and I don't know why they killed her off so early. But they capture her and knock her out with kind of a stun gun, and then they put them in separate prison cells, but because he's also a range guy, he can kind of Kaz can telepathically communicate with her, and they form what's called a union, which is just sort of a temporary bond between them. They're going to cooperate while they fight, but range guys don't make like permanent relationships, so they're not going to continue with this after they escape the Deathsport, which inevitably they do. Meanwhile, the little girl who was with them is captured by these cannibal mutants and dragged off somewhere. And rather conveniently for the plot, she's not killed until they figure out what to do with her. But Lord Zappola, who is rather cruel, puts Claudia Jennings into this sort of trap that he has, where there are these poles that are sort of glass, and then he electrifies them and starts like zapping her with them, and she screams and passes out. And he does all sorts of, he's like giving electrical shocks to David Carradine's character, Kaz, and, trying to make him compliant, and they're compelled to race in this Deathsport. They both agree to do it, but they're not going to, fight against each other. They're going to fight against these criminals who are put onto motorcycles and given red and white helmets, and they're all rather ridiculous. They ride around this arena, and a lot of this was filmed in either Vasquez Rocks or Bronson Canyon, which are two infamous or famous, I should say, Los Angeles locations where everything from Star Trek to Lost in Space has used Battlestar Galactica. Almost every planet, alien planet that you see is either Vasquez Rocks or Bronson Canyon. And Bronson Canyon was also notoriously used in one of the worst movies ever, Robot Monster, and I think Deathsport competes even with that. As for really, really bad. Apparently, if you can't write a script, the idea is just blow lots of stuff up. And although at the beginning of the movie, Lord Zappola says, we can't afford to lose any more death machines. So they're planning to raid their neighborhood state, which is called Triton. It's spelled Tritan for some reason. And they want their fuel. So they want to save these things, but still they're like wasting them in the Deathsport, and like 50 of them get blown up, and they still seem to have a lot of them left over. The range guys manage to defeat all the people that are sent against them, and they kidnap a couple of Helix higher ups. One of them is named Dr. Carl, and that's William Smithers, and Marcus Carl, his son, is actually a good guy. He's played by Will Walker, and he's fighting for them. He wants the same thing. He wants to abolish Lord Zappola and his rule. But they kidnap him as kind of a ruse to try and get back this girl who was kidnapped. And then they find out belatedly that she's not being held by the Helixians. She's being held by the mutants. They have to go up against the mutants, who are like ridiculous looking. They look like they've got like pea soup on their faces. That's what it looks like. And they have these like ping pong ball eyeballs that are staring and wide, and they're afraid of fire, and really ridiculous caricature kind of creatures. But they chase them into this cave, and they're trying to get the girl back, and they have to fight them off. And David Carradine gets stranded, but he still has his sword, so he manages to kill one. He says, "Taste my blade." That's like one of the worst lines I've ever heard. But well, the way he delivered it was really bad. So they get the girl back, and they manage to. Lord Zappola dies. He's torturing another woman with his glass rods, and she pulls him into the field, and he's electrocuted and killed. So now the bad guy, who is played rather wonderfully by Richard Lynch, whose name is Angkor Moore, and he's apparently a former range guide, and he was in love with, but he also killed O'Shea, who is Kaz O'Shea's mother. And so he has a personal grudge of Vedena, but he won't agree to honorably fight him. He refuses, even though that's in the range guide rule. He said, well, I'm not following any rules anymore. Now I'm going to be the leader of Helix, and we're going to raid Triton, and we're going to do whatever I want. And he sends his people out to get him. Of course, they all fail, because that's what always happens in a movie like this. The bad guys fail, and they all get killed. And finally, he has no choice but to fight him in single combat. And they use their glass swords. And although he's cheating, Angkor Moore is cheating, and using weapons and things, Kaz O'Shea manages to outwit him, and he decapitates him. And that's the end of that. And then they've recovered the girl. So he and Denier abandon their death machines and ride horses literally off into the sunset. Really bad. It's like a bad Western meets a bad motorcycle motorsport movie. If you like watching motorcycles blow up, although I suspect it was actually the same motorcycle just being blown up over and over again, then you'll like this movie, because that's basically, I think they spent 99% of their budget on pyrotechnics. Apparently they had lots of problems with the movie. Claudia Jennings was a notorious drunk and a cokehead also, and often showed up, quote-unquote, glazed. Carradine had his own drug problems, too, at the time, which he admitted to, but apparently there was one scene where they had to get two extras to drag her off her motorcycle because she was completely out of it. Corman insisted on adding a few more nude scenes because he didn't think there were enough, which are pretty much, pretty gratuitous, and, this was actually one of the last movies that Claudia Jennings made before she died in a car accident in 1979. Like I said, Carradine regretted making the movie, and I can understand why after having seen this. This is one, again, that I do not recommend.